Welcome everybody to the Church-Refugee Sanity Guide. Glad you're here. What brings us here tonight, I hope? Some things that we might have in common. I hope we all love the Lord to some degree or another. Is that reasonable? We're here because we love Jesus. I hope we have a measure of love for one another and learning to get better at that. And I hope we have a love for the world. But ultimately, we're most likely here because somewhere along the way, we have found that a traditional local church experience has been disappointing, if not painful. Some of us are here because we instinctively have felt that something is just not working. Does that make sense to anybody? And my privilege is I get to talk to a lot of people around the world. And what I find is when I talk to different people, the names and the faces change, but they all have the same questions. So one reason we're doing it this way, instead of me having 35 private conversations, do one conversation for a group of people. Because the questions tend to be down the same line. It doesn't matter where you are. You're in Europe, you're in North America, you're in Central America. The questions are the same. So we wanted to do this, and my friend Lauren suggested putting it on video also because people have the same questions and to have a resource to give to people. We may be in very diverse stages, and those that might be watching this on video could be in very diverse stages in our walk with the Lord. Some of us may have been extracted from institutional religion for some time. How many have you would call have been out for more than 5 years? Okay. How many more than 10? Okay, pioneers, progressives. All right. So we're somewhat on the front end of that. I'm at 11 myself. Some are newly out. Some are considering leaving. Some have tried home church, snicker, 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 thinking that that is the answer. For those of you that have already done that merry-go-round, how many of you already discovered it ain't the answer? Yeah. Some have tried so-called organic church. I'm not a close friend with Frank Viola, but I know Frank casually. And Frank has just put out a new book. You never guess what the title of Frank's new book is. Why I'm Leaving Organic Church. To me, that indicates that there's a yearning for spiritual reality, for substance, that we just haven't found. And what I've discovered is that just changing the location of my rear end from a sanctuary to a living room is not necessarily spiritually progressive. It's deeper than that. It's also very common in this process of extraction to feel very disoriented, hurt, lost, confused, and misunderstood. It is a privilege for me to talk to people around the world, but it is also heartbreaking to hear the pain in their voices. Just today, it is, for those on DVD, April 22nd, 2016. Today, I read a news story where a leader of a Christian denomination who wasn't named basically said, anybody like you and I are not Christians anyway. He was referring to the over 30 million and rising who are leaving institutional religion, and he brushed them all off with the sweep of his hand as that they never were really Christians. It's funny, if you and I say something mildly negative about organizational structures, what are some of the names that you're going to be accused of? Heretic, rebel, backslider. But you know, somebody at the head of a denomination can make a sweeping statement like that and he gets press in a Christian magazine. Double standard from my perspective. These feelings are often reinforced by friends and loved ones. I'm just going to read off some of the things that are typically said to a group like ourselves. Well, no one else feels this way. Why are you so unhappy? How about this one? Are you smarter and more spiritual than everybody else? Who do you think you are? Now, I see some heads nodding already. How about these interior voices? You ever hear these in your own head? I must be crazy. No, everybody else seems to really like this, so there's clearly something wrong with me. I'm alone. How many, I hear this over and over and over. Steve, I'm so alone. I can't find anyone to even talk to. I can't even find a frequency of commonality that I can communicate with somebody. How many of you have ever felt you're losing your mind? I'll confess I had a little mini breakdown a couple of years ago. It's like you really begin to doubt your sanity. You begin to doubt the things that you were taught and you were taken for granted. How many have ever heard this one? This is on Facebook all the time. Why don't we just all love one another and get along? You know, that's flowers and marshmallows and unicorns and daisies. How many of you have really, really, really tried, and no matter what you do, you just can't find home? I'm in that category. Here's one. For those of you that follow any of my stuff, the most popular blog I've ever done in 11 years was this one, called The New Jezebel, You're Just Wounded. How many of you heard that? Oh, you know, you're wounded. To try to dismiss any sort of concern or criticism or just ask, oh, you know, you're wounded and you're bitter. No, I'm not wounded and I'm not bitter. I'm thinking, what's your problem? You're rebellious. How many of you ever heard this one? Well, you just have a problem submitting to authority. Oh yeah, everybody's going amen on that one. You're an Absalom. You're a Jezebel. You know, anybody who's a functional, you know, I'll put it to you this way. To an insecure controller, normal human functionhood is always going to be a threat. I'll say that again. To an insecure controller, you functioning as a normal human will be a threat. And you're a Jezebel. You're an Absalom. You have issues. I know I have issues, but so does this situation. I want to start this session by telling you, which you may know instinctively, you are not alone. Josh Packard, who's kind of a church statistician, says there are currently 65 million people that he calls the nones and dones. I don't know how it is with you, but when you go back to your hometown and again, you're alone, you don't have any peers, you don't have any friends, does it ever feel like the world is kind of caving in on you and they want to make you feel like you're the freak? 65 million. Another 7 million are almost done on their way out, for a total of 72 million people worldwide have exited from traditional church constructs. So the next time you're having a conversation and somebody wants to try to marginalize you or make you feel like you're just, no, God is doing this. We're going to talk about IC, non-IC and stuff in a minute. We're probably going to end this session on some of that. But this is not some fringe thing. I believe with all my heart we are living in the most exciting days. I'm going to say something that hyperbolic now, but I mean it, since Martin Luther. And I believe what's happening is greater than what happened in the Protestant Reformation. And I believe the passions and the vitriol is also intenser than it was in the Protestant Reformation. The interesting statistic about the 65 million or 70 million who have left or are leaving, they are the best overall. There's a percentage of them that are kind of like just the chronic complainers and the marginals. But the vast majority of them are the best and the brightest, the most sincere, the most serious, the people who take their faith and following the Lord most seriously. Because one of the canards that is often thrown at us is, we're the eternally dissatisfied grumblers who weren't contributing much anyway. That is simply not a fact. On your handout sheet, second and third page, I've provided for you some statistics. I don't want to take a lot of time tonight to run through these, but I just want you right now take 3 or 4 minutes and just scan down those statistics. And at the end of it, I also provide where I got this information. Those are statistics of what is really going on in evangelical Christianity.
In America, 3,500 to 4,000 churches close their doors each year. Churches lose an estimated 2,765,000 people each year to nominalism and secularism. Only 21% of Americans attend religious services every week. The share of Americans who say they never attend church was 9.3% in 1972. By 2012, it was 25.3% and continues to rise. 40 years ago, the nuns were only 5.1% of Americans, but today the number has passed 20% and seems to still be growing. Professional pastors. 38% are divorced or divorcing. 50% admit to using pornography, and 37% report to inappropriate sexual behavior with someone in the church. 75% report being extremely stressed or highly stressed. 90% work between 55 to 75 hours per week. 90% feel fatigued and worn out every week. 70% say they're grossly underpaid. 40% report a serious conflict with a parishioner at least once a month. 78% were forced to resign, and 63% at least twice, most commonly because of church conflict. 80% will not be in ministry 10 years later, and only a fraction make it a lifelong career. 100% of 1,050 Reformed and evangelical pastors had a colleague who had left the ministry because of burnout, church conflict, or moral failure. 91% have experienced some form of burnout in ministry, and 18% say they are fried to a crisp right now. Statistics on pastors' emotional health, family, and morality. It's particularly disturbing to see how much pastors are struggling with emotional pain, family problems, loving well, and moral failures. 70% say they have a lower self-esteem now than when they entered ministry. 70% constantly fight depression. 50% feel so discouraged that they would leave the ministry if they could, but can't find another job. 80% believe their pastoral ministry has negatively affected their families, and 33% said it was an outright hazard. 80% of ministry spouses feel left out and unappreciated in their church. 77% feel they do not have a good marriage. 41% display anger problems in marriage, reported by the spouse. Statistics on pastors' lack of soul care and training. Ministry stress alone does not explain why pastors burn out emotionally or blow out morally. Other statistics suggest that many pastors struggle with professionalizing their spiritual lives and failing to care for their own souls under God. 70% do not have someone they consider a close friend. 50% do not meet regularly with an accountability person or group. 72% only study the Bible when preparing for sermons or lessons. 21% spend less than 15 minutes a day in prayer. The average is 39 minutes per day. 16% are very satisfied with their prayer life. 47% are somewhat satisfied. 37% are either somewhat dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. Spending more time in quiet prayer or listening to God versus making requests was correlated with higher satisfaction. 44% of pastors do not take a regular day off. 31% do not exercise at all, while 37% exercise at least 3 or 4 days a week as recommended. 90% say they have not received adequate training to meet the demands of ministry. 85% have never taken a sabbatical.
Those are not very cheery. How many of you have ever had to deal with, well, you're just being negative and critical? You have in front of you data that tells you you are not being negative and critical, you're being a realist. I have a hypothetical question for you. In any human enterprise other than religion, if there was an enterprise that had those kind of statistics, what would you say about that enterprise, and what would you do with that enterprise? Talk to me. What would you say about an enterprise with those kind of statistics? Give me some adjectives. Bankrupt. Disaster.
Vacant, yeah.
What's that?
Vacant.
Vacant. Some more. If it was a business enterprise, and those were the statistics in your business, what would you do with that business? You'd close it. Demolition. There is no other human enterprise that makes more excuses for its dysfunction than religious establishments. When I present that to people, here's what I typically get. Oh, our church is not like that. I tell you what, your church is like that. I do a thing called a ministry assessment, and for somebody foolish enough to allow me proximity to their endeavor, I'll say this. Let me do an anonymous survey. I'll ask 5 questions of everybody in your congregation, and I'll get back to you about what people are really thinking. I'll do it anonymously. I've never had anybody take me up on it. Because instinctively they know this is not working. One of the questions is this. Other than preaching, singing, and Sunday school, do you feel equipped for life and ministry in this place? What is practically, you know what? Could be very quiet. Question number 2. Have you ever had lunch or dinner with any staff member in this place? Just like today, the crickets are normally chirping. Anyway, we do a thing. In what human endeavor other than the church would you not want something accurately diagnosed? Because if you don't accurately diagnose it, you can't fix it. But there is a culture of denial. No, our church is great. You know, oh no, our pastor is great. It's the other guy's church. No, we're in this together. It's not the other guy's church. This is an endeavor that is constitutionally broken. Is that fair to say? And here's the thing, guys. This is not, oh, Steve Crosby, you're just an angry, bitter old guy. Those demographics, those stats tell me I'm not an angry, bitter old guy. I would say other folks are in denial. What are some of the reasons folks can be in denial? And they're easy. Fire them at me.
Protect their own interests.
Protect their own interests. And what are those interests? There's 2 or 3 big ones. Livelihood, ego and status. Yep. We are going to keep this thing going even though it's broke. Do you know, and this is a statistic I'm pulling from memory, so I could be off. What they'll do is they'll point to the top 2-3% that look like success based on worldly standards. What are the worldly standards of success? Money and size. Oh, look how great we're doing. Guess how many people are in an average congregation in the United States? There's actually 3,000 or 4,000 that are closing every year. Guess how big an average congregation is? Less than 200. Lower. Keep going. Right on. Very close. Now listen to me. The average congregation in the United States is between 50 and 70 people. There's nothing wrong with being small. But I was in a meeting once where it was a so-called regional revival meeting. You know, we want to bring revival to our city. And I knew the guys in the room. Some of them are pastoring churches with 10 and 12 and 20 people. I said, you know what, if you really cared about this community, y'all would actually work together, pool your asset. Man, it got Why? Because any fool can talk about praying for revival when you're custodian over your own little empire. If you want to see revival and unity, the first thing that has to go is empire. Ego and empire. Like all transitions, they are messy. I like to describe myself as very much on a journey, in a pilgrimage. I know it's kind of cliche language. We know what was. We know what we don't want. But where we're going and what we're looking for can be very elusive. Can anybody relate to that? It's much easier to know that I don't want this than it is to say, I want that. We have to deconstruct on the front end, but that's not enough. It's not enough to stay in kind of a puddle of angry deconstruction. We have to move on to something. The nature of Abrahamic faith is to not be able to explain where you are going. See, American church culture, church growth statistics tell you have to have a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and a 15-year plan, and you have to articulate the vision to the people, because how can you expect them to follow you if you don't have a vision? What were the instructions to Abraham? Get up, go, and I'll explain it to you when you get there. Can you imagine his conversations with his relatives? Now think about it. He's leaving his bank account. He's leaving his property. He's leaving his relatives other than the ones he took with him. Abraham, where are you going? I don't know. What are you going to do when you get there?
No clue.
I don't know. How's it going to go? Saints, listen to me. I've lived this, and I'm going to stop with this story and one more point. I was in a traditional church structure one time. We'd done some really good things and really cleaned up a very difficult, horrible situation. But I just had this nagging feeling that, man, I don't know what we're doing. And a saint from the congregation, a blessed emissary of the Lord, came into my office and in a less than charitable way goes, "Where are you leading this congregation?" And in a moment, I just felt my soul just kind of drained from me. And here's my profound answer. Here's how I said it. I don't know. How does that go over in American church world if you're a leader? I went through about 3-4 days of absolute torment. So yeah, you know what? I'm really worthless. And but hey, I'm just like my father Abraham. He didn't know where he was going either. If you know where you're going, you can manage it, package it, commoditize it, sell it, and ship it. But if you don't know where you're going, there's a constant leading into the Lord, step by step, a faith adventure. It can be mentally, spiritually, relationally, emotionally challenging in a season like this. You know where you've been isn't working, but you don't necessarily know where you're going to go. We're going to talk about how to handle friends and families in another session in more detail. But how many have had these awkward conversations where you've tried to explain it to somebody and you just feel like your pants are around your ankles? And then this other then what comes on you? See, that proves that you're not in God's will. All that guilt and shame, it comes on you. Those are the things that we have to navigate through emotionally as human beings. Lastly, for this session, then we'll break for some discussion. There is a difference, and this is very important for where we're going, between being institutional and being organized. All of the universe is organized, right? It's ordered, but it's not institutional. Sometimes we come out of where we've been and we make the institution the bad guy. I've been in groups that I call semi-pietistic. For those of you that are church historians, you can look it up. But you know what these groups do? Eternal navel gazers. They sit around in a circle, criticizing where they've been, and guess what they're doing? Nothing. I've been in groups where it's, I actually know organic church people who would react to this meeting. You know why? Because it's scheduled. And somebody's teaching. We don't do that. Oh, it's normal to go to reactionary extremes, but we don't want to live there. Go to a reactionary extreme, puke out your garbage, and move on. The issue is not the venue of our meetings, but it's the values in our hearts. When structure serves the appropriate values, it's legitimized. When structure becomes its own reason for existence, it's not legitimate. One of the most progressive, spiritually vibrant, community transforming fellowships I have the privilege of being a part of is structured traditionally, but their thinking and their heart is not structured. Their values are new. Very quickly, some of the values in that church. You don't want to come on Sunday morning, it doesn't matter. If you don't feel like it, if you've got something better to do, go do it. There's more important things than listening to me. Number 2, if you've got better places to put your money than this place, put it there. You don't owe this church anything. Number 3, let's give our building to the other church because they would do better with it than we are. They did that. Those are some kingdom values. And I could go on and on. So as we go through this weekend, we need to understand it's about a values purge, not a venue modification. I've been in some organic church meetings that I wouldn't want. They were the most toxic. I wouldn't want to be a part of them. The problem is not how we meet. It's the values, beliefs, mindsets, and practices we bring to the gathering. Being meeting-centric instead of people-centric is the problem. Thinking that the meeting defines our spirituality. No, it doesn't, yet there's nothing wrong with meetings. Alrighty, that's it for the first session.
For additional books, materials, and resources, including Kindle, EPUB, and PDF files, please go to stevecrosby.com. For free articles, MP3s, and resources, go to stevecrosby.org.